matter of opinion.
So you're saying that you lost your property on somebody else? Would you like to talk to us on camera?
I most certainly would. I don't know that if you'd be interested in hearing what I have to say.
Well, I mean, just...
I'm very concerned about the news media waiting until now to really look at this as a coverable news story. Okay? But things are what they are. At any rate, what I was getting ready to say was I wouldn't participate in this because I know from first-hand experience that in order, for example, for a first-time home buyer to buy their home here, it's dependent upon someone else's misery. Someone has to have become a victim through this. And when I say victim, in my case in particular, and I can't speak for everybody's cases, I was a victim of fraud. It's plain and simple. By one of the largest banks in the industry. A bank, Fremont Investment and Loan, and you can beat that out if you want to, but headquartered in California, who was so bad, I kind of called it borderline criminal. Apparently the FDIC didn't agree with that, and they closed them down because they were criminal. And I called them borderline because I figured there must be something about what they were doing that was legal. And as I was reading up and studying the law, because I could not get an attorney to speak with me, I had to study it up myself. Found out basically everything they're doing is legal. Why? Because they wrote the laws in support of themselves, and especially to make the victims look like they're at fault, and they're not.
So you're saying what happened in your case is what I was trying to get a gist of, because different people's stories as far as predatory lending is concerned, they vary greatly. I
was issued a loan that the lending institution knew that I could not afford. When I talked to them on the phone, they told me that my income was not the issue. What was that? It was not criteria that they used to determine the amount of the loan.
Okay, so what was? I'll start over on that.
My income was not the criteria that was used to determine the amount of the loan. What they used as a criteria to determine the amount of the loan was the maximum amount allowable by law. That's what I was told over the phone. I couldn't carry that telephone conversation any further because I wasn't recording it. But it created a real problem for me. And everything went spiraling downhill from then. When I discovered that they were more interested in foreclosing than to get their money, and I didn't understand that at the time. Since that time, I've lost my employment, I've lost my house, I've lost just about everything. I am living under a roof by the good graces of a friend. It's as simple as that. And I want to do everything I can to resolve this issue. Unfortunately, the powers that be really get too much benefit out of this. Now, when I say the powers that be, I think when we dig deeply enough and we find out what's going on with the overall economy and not just the housing mortgage situations, you'll discover that the underlying cause of this entire thing is, number one, the Federal Reserve, which is not a government agency, and number two, Congress, which allows the Federal Reserve to exist. I believe that this is not going to be resolved until the Federal Reserve does not exist anymore. Unfortunately, I believe that the only way that that's going to happen is a revolution in this country. I think that George Bush is pushing this country toward war against itself, which I don't particularly care for, but the handwriting is on the wall. The Federal Reserve is the ones who are benefiting from this, and ironically, the loudest voice calling for reform in predatory lending laws is coming from the Federal Reserve. Go figure.
Okay, so as far as you being here, have you already lost your property?
Yes.
Okay, so are you here as a form of silent protest, or are you just observing exactly? Because if you hadn't seen me walking around with the microphone, I would have never known that you were someone who didn't agree with the process.
I am here with a colleague doing a documentary on predatory lending. Okay, so I don't necessarily call that silent protest. I appear the way I do because people look at me and they assume that I'm affiliated with attorneys. I'm a victim of another sort of fraud right here on the courthouse steps as I stood and watched my property being not auctioned as the guy, without doing what do you call it? Wrote on the return to lending, just dropped it on top of the house.